Hi, everyone. Thanks for waiting and for your patience. We are live. My name is Deanna Wolf, and I am the Senior Consultant for Trust Fundraising here at Money Tree Fundraising. And every third Thursday of the month, we come live to you to answer your questions and hopefully give you some good answers about trust fundraising. So we are broadcasting today on Money Tree Fundraising's LinkedIn account. We're also on Trust Fundraise, hashtag Trust Fundraise over on Twitter, which is the Trust Fundraising Hub there. And we are here on the Trust Fundraising Hub as well. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the box below the recording and I will answer them. And in the meantime, I thought I'd go through some of the questions that have been asked online or throughout the last month or so and give you some answers. If not very many questions come up as well, I've also got a top tips section and suggestions for you that I have received and that I put together a few years ago from a survey that was done. So one of the things that was asked quite a number of times was about the income level of a small charity and what constitutes a small charity. And one of those questions was, will the funders stop funding you? It will depend on who the funder is and whether or not they fund in the area that you work in, and if those areas are the things that you are looking to do. One of the things I did a little bit of research, and for the most part, it seems that charities under £1 million of income or turnover are considered to be small charities. That's 97% of the roughly 169,000 charities out there. So 163,000 charities are considered small. And the rest are medium and large, but that's 3%. That's not very many. So I'm wondering whether the classification system is actually a little bit out of whack, where the majority of the charities are considered small, but the variety and the amount of money that any of those little charities, the majority of them, can range anywhere from, say, £25,000 or even less, and be micro charities all the way up to £1 million, which is actually quite, especially if you're a local charity or a regional charity, that's puts you into the big fish, or at least makes you a big fish in a small pond. And I think that is the way you need to look at it. Is it's a relative amount. When you're looking to work with with organizations that you want funding from, go with what they're determining as their income levels for small, medium, and large. But I would say that if you're over £1 million £1 million in income, you're probably actually considered a big charity. Whether that's because you're a big charity and a big fish in a small pond, or whether because you're now into the bigger ponds and the lakes. But keep that in mind. There's an awful lot that are under 250,000. There's an awful lot that are under 50,000. And under that, and under 25,000, you don't need to be, I think it's under 25,000, you don't need to be filing quite in the same way with HMRC and with the Charity Commission. So I would consider, when I'm looking at it, my rule of thumb is that if you're £500,000 and under, you're considered small. I would say if you're bringing in over £500,000, keep in mind 500,000 is £500,000. If I had £500,000, I'd be very, very happy. And I think any of us would be. But for a lot of charities that are working on mainly volunteer staff or minimal staff, £500,000 coming in is a lot of money. And you have a lot of processes and you have a lot of systems in place, and you are probably delivering a lot of services. So please keep that in mind. If you're under 250,000, I think is where a lot of charities are considering funding people, and that's where it's small. If you're bringing in over £1 million and you're going to be having difficulty bringing in funding from trusts and foundations because of that, I think you need to target very, very, very well, and you need to know who you can go to. It may reduce the number of funders you can apply to, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bad thing. Sometimes reducing the number of funders you can apply to actually means that you're targeting really, really well, and your chances of getting funding from them are higher. If you're doing a scattergun approach and going to anyone just because, they fund in this area, that doesn't necessarily mean they're the right funder for you or for your project. So I think my request would be, I would like the industry and the sector to potentially come up with a better determination of what is considered small, medium, and large. And if you're looking down from a charity that's earning over £15 million a year, that's a lot of money, and you are a large charity in the grand scheme of things. You're looking down on the rest of everyone else that's out there. The majority, you're in the top 3%, and maybe we need to designate that 97% a little bit better than, oh, they're all just small, they don't count as much. So there's that. Another thing we had was somebody was asking about how do you go and find find funders based on the grant range that they're going to. I had answered this question, a number of other people did as well. You can do some searches where it's based on the value the funder is providing. Once you've within it, because of the income levels that they're giving out. And to a certain extent, if someone's giving over £100,000 every year, an organization rather, chances are they're going to be giving the larger amounts. However, I did come across one funder a number of years ago that gave out £100,000 every year. They gave out 100 gifts of £1,000 every year. So I think that you need to be very aware of it. And I would probably do your search rather than looking at what are the funders that can go from £10,000 to £50,000. I would go, who are the funders who could fund me and who do I match with, and go from there, and then categorize your list rather than looking at of that those 169,000 charities that are out there. There's only maybe 8 or 10,000 of them that give out grants, and the numbers I'm probably off by a couple thousand or so here or there. I would probably go and find out who you can get funding from, because everyone else that's giving £10,000 to £20,000, it doesn't matter if you can't get money from them. Don't bother with them. They don't need to come into your radar. They actually muddy the waters for you. So I would probably look at it as find a pipeline of potential funders that fund your activities, fund the kinds of things that you do, fund in your area, the people that you would be considering looking for, and then find out what benchmark where they give and target them. It will save you a lot of time in the end, rather than trying to go, oh, here's a list of 50 funders who give between 10 and 20 grand. You're looking at it kind of the hard way around, because then you still have to find out if any of them give in your area or in your giving area. What was another question that came up? There were lots of questions asking about funding for organizational infrastructure this time. And we're regularly getting a lot of questions on Trust Fundraising Hub about where do I go to find funding to pay for this or that or the next thing. And it's stuff like laptops for staff, or building repairs for your offices, or a CRM, or tech that is largely due to your organizational infrastructure rather than benefits to your organization. And excuse me if I suddenly turn away, I'm about to sneeze, I think. Keep in mind that funders are funding us for the works that we're delivering to our beneficiaries and our causes. We are the translators, we're the intermediaries and the facilitators. We are not the end goal of their funding. There are a few funders out there who fund charitable infrastructure because that's what they're set up to do, is to make sure that the infrastructure of the charity sector and the third sector is working well. And by having the tools and the locations and the resources that we need as organizations to deliver that, that's important. But there are few and far between. And with news such as the FSI choosing to close down in the next year, the infrastructure support that's there for us is being reduced and reduced and reduced. Remember that that when it comes right down to it, charities are businesses, and we have to act like businesses. If we want to do things, we have to act like businesses. Businesses, when they want to do capital infrastructure, or they want to improve their resources and their internal tools, they either raise their prices on their services, we can't do that, or they go and they make sure that some of the fundings, that some of their profits every year gets put aside for that rainy day fund, for replacement of equipment, for depreciation, to cover depreciation, for a new capital repair to replace a roof. Those are the kinds of things, and it's infrastructure for their offices as well. Those are the kinds of things that as organizations, we need to be thinking of. So while we want every penny and all the money we have to go to cover the costs of our services, some of that needs to go to our core costs. Some of our core costs are making sure that we have the appropriate materials and appropriate services. So it's about the people above us in the finance teams, in SMT, in the trustees, making the strategic decisions on their balance sheets and in their financial plans and organizational plans and business plans to make sure those things are covered. It's really difficult to get to trusts for that funding. There is some out there, and I'm not going to lie, and every people will put up the 3 or 4 different funders that can do it every single time. But competition is very high for them, and a lot of time the tech that they want to cover is tech that benefits the beneficiary. It doesn't benefit the organization. If you are going to a funder for internal tech, for a CRM system, which is an admin system, make sure that you are tying it really, really, really clearly and really compellingly on how that is going to help you deliver better services. Not just, oh, our staff is going to be happier, but having this information to hand means that we will be able to cut our admin time by 50%, which means that we will be able to be more effective, be more efficient, deliver more services, put more of our funding that we get to covering the costs of our service to our beneficiaries. I hope that helps. It kind of still leaves you between a rock and a hard place when you have to talk to your trustees, but it's worth going and saying, we need to have a fund. This is what your reserves are for. This is what designated reserves are for replacing equipment, for fixing buildings, for doing repairs, for covering depreciation. Talk to the finance team about it and say, this isn't really something that could come from trusts and foundations. And if TNF are your only income stream, then you need to start exploring other income streams and how you're going to bring those on board and where the resource is going to come to be able to do that. It's all about growth, and it's not an easy system, and it's not easy. No questions yet, so feel free to ask questions, people. I'm quite happy to answer them. In the meantime, one of the things I've been doing lately, and this morning and this week I've been attending a conference as well. It's a virtual conference. I want to talk to you about continuing professional development and training. I've been doing this for 20 years, 21 years almost now, and I still have lots to learn. I went and was listening to someone talk at the Hospice Income Generation Conference this morning about tips and tricks about doing trust fundraising. And I got to tell you, I've got 3 pages worth of notes of things that I didn't think about or I'd forgotten about, because I've been doing this long enough that I'm starting to forget what I already know. And many of you will probably be in the same situation. So my suggestion is your continuing professional development is not the responsibility of your employer. It's your responsibility to make sure that you have the training that you need. If your employer is able to pay for it or you're able to pay for it, that is wonderful. Take advantage whenever you possibly can. And don't just look for trusts and foundations funding or training. Look for training around writing, around understanding accounts, around understanding the charity SORP, around understanding charity legal systems and how the system works. Look about relationship management and human resources management, project development and project design and project management, about records and archives. As trust fundraisers, we keep a lot of notes because we are playing the long game. We're very much playing the long game. So when I start with working with a new funder or with a new charity, I want to know who has funded them before. What's the relationship been? I've been in places, and I'm sure I've possibly said it here before, where a trustee at my charity and a trustee at the charity I'm applying for funding to got in a scrap, and because they knew each other and they didn't like each other, they fell out, and we started not getting funding from them anymore at this organization. And I think that's the kind of thing that you need to keep in mind. Trusts have long memories. They keep records. You need to keep records. So understanding records management and archiving and understanding what to keep and what not to keep, specific to trusts and foundations, although the rules change for other income streams and possibly for HMRC as well. But I know that HMRC says 7 years. The lottery says 25 years, that they'll go back to find out whether they gave you funding, to find out whether or not the article, especially for capital, if the funding they give you for capital, be it large or small, such as equipment, whether you still have that. And you still have to have those pieces in place, and you have to have records to manage it. So keep that in mind when you're going through. Where do you find it? Here on Trust Fundraising Hub, we now have a new trust fundraising stream, a learning and training post. So please do, if you are giving training, if you are know of training training opportunities that are out there or learning opportunities, we now have a new designated post in the pinned posts and the featured posts at the top. Just pop it in there every month. You can post it in there rather than in the mainstream. The other thing you can do is get on the mailing lists for some of the newsletters out there in our sector that are free, such as UK fundraising and funding. A third sector has a newsletter that you can sign up for. However, they generally just give you the unless you're a member and you're paying for the resources, you usually only just get the headlines. But sometimes the headlines let you do a good Google search. And I know that I went and have started doing a series of financial session trainings on accounts and on the charity SORP and on what's in a good annual review and annual accounts and records. And it's important to get that. It's free, and I signed up, and it was great. They're webinars. They're an hour once a week. There was about 7 or 8 of them, and I've chosen to go to 4, but I'm learning a little bit more. The thing is that if you have been doing this for a long time, we know a lot, but we are also starting to forget everything that we knew. So it's important to go in, do the CPD, find out what remind yourself what you already know, give yourself a confidence boost that you do know what you're talking about and they've done it. And when you've gone to a session and it's great, you can come back and say, yes, it was a great reminder of all the things I already knew, and it brought them to mind again. And so when you're talking to your colleagues, to your senior management team, to your trustees, you can say, I am the expert. I've gone this. Someone else has been saying exactly the same thing as I have. I hope that's helpful. We also had a question earlier in the Trust Fundraising Hub earlier this month from Becky Atkinson, who asked about help looking to negotiate funds from a trust, on how to negotiate moving funds from a trust from one project to another and how you go about it. Now, there were quite a number of answers there, and they were all quite good. One of the things that I can tell you is that I've done this. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't really particularly difficult either. You have to be prepared that the funder was going to say no and that they're not going to take it, and they either want the funds returned to them or they want you to continue funding the project that you've done. Be prepared before you approach them. Know why you're going to change them, where you're going to move the money from, know exactly how much money, and almost prepare the contents of another proposal to them of why you're taking the money from one project to another and what it needs to happen. A lot will understand that trusts and the trusts and foundations out there deal with us every single day. That's what they do. They know a lot more about us than we think they do. They do their due diligence on us. And they also see tons and tons and tons of applications coming across their desks every single funding round. They know what's going on out in the sector. They are just as expert at doing what we do as we are. and they're very good at seeing what works and what doesn't work, and they've got the breadth of knowledge of it. So when you're going out to ask them to move, be very upfront about why. Come to them with a fully formed solution and options that you can do. And like I said, be prepared that they're going to say no, or they want their money back, or they want you to continue funding the project that you're funding. If you're moving it because it just makes sense and for you, but you still have the program going on that they were funding, find out why you're not and be prepared for them to say no. I hope that helps. It's the be prepared. Know exactly what you want to do and understand why you want to do it. Kelsey Parsnip, who is quite active on Trust Fundraising Hub, so thank you very much, Kelsey. She was asking about managing trusts in a database, and that includes, do people include trusts still to be qualified, or did people keep them in spreadsheets? Now, I answered on this one. I know a number of other people did, and I think it does come down to your organization and how you want to do it. I bring to bear on this my experience as a librarian, and having worked in records management, about bringing information out and being able to access information. A database is only as good as the information you've put into it. So it's one of the phrases that gets used often is garbage in, garbage out. But it's also quality in, quality out. So you want to go for quality in, and so you can pull quality out. I tended to not put my trusts in my long list, or even my initial short list. I tended to not put those into the database, partially because I wasn't sure whether they would work, partially because I wasn't sure whether they were the right charity, and partially because a lot of CRMs out there aren't actually set up very well for trusts and foundations. They're set up really, because we tend to work from the point of view of a project, and then we find funders for it. Whereas a lot of other income streams look at funders to fund the project, and they look at it from the other point of view to a certain extent. I tended to leave my charities that were still being qualified in an Excel sheet. Also because an Excel sheet, you can see multiple entries at once, and often in a CRM, you have to go into one record and then come out, and then go into another record and come out, and go into a third record and come out. And then sometimes you want to compare them, and you want to see where everything is going. And so it's often a new screen comes up each single time. Not all of them are like that, and some you can configure in such a way that they work a little bit better. But an Excel sheet for me, or any other spreadsheet system that you're using, depending on which system and which technology system you're using, an IT system you're using, it is always a good way to get your initial thoughts down. It's a working sheet. It also means that if you get halfway through funding something and you decide they're not the right ones for me, I'm not going to go to them. If I would put them into your spreadsheet or into your CRM if you are regularly asked for it, with a note of why, or a note of this needs to be reviewed annually, and maybe set up some kind of trigger within your CRM so an annual review happens on those ones. But if it's in your spreadsheet, it's a lot easier to manage as a group initially, and then you can add the details of, once you've applied to the funder, you can put that into the spreadsheet at that point, or into the database at that point. I hope that helps. I know that there's people who completely go the opposite direction as me, and so I would say that there's no one right way. Find the way that works best for you and for your organization, with a view to, you want to plan for the day when you are not going to be working at your organization anymore and someone else is coming in. And the one thing I would say is, leave your records and leave your data and your trusts and foundations information in the way that you would have wanted to find them when you arrived at the organization. Now, we've had no questions and just a little bit of time left to go. So thank you to the 7 people that are watching on Facebook Hub at the moment, or on the Fundraising Hub on Facebook. And I hope that we have some more questions at some point. One of the things that did come up that I found is a few years ago, I had done some research and where I got in touch with lots and lots and lots of people and lots of trust fundraisers across the UK. And this was it was in advance of a conference session at at the then Institute of Fundraising up here in Scotland. And I think we then delivered it down south in England at the National Convention. But one of the things that we did was ask people for their top tips. And we got an amazing variety of them. So we pooled them all together, categorized them, and made sure that they were nice and clear. And there was a handout at that session. Since then, Suzanne's asked for a question, and let me tell you about this, and then I'll tell you, Suzanne, and I'll ask when you're looking what they're looking for. So one of the things, the really quick things, was top tips for finance. So one of them, the things that you want to do, and it's in line with the reserves policy here, is if you're looking for finance information and how to present things and what you want to do. So from a financial point of view, you want to analyze the previous accounts of the trust that you're applying to in detail, particularly the breakdown of the grants given at the end of their accounts. That will help you to find out what to ask for, what kinds of things they give to, whether they give in your area, whether over the last few years they've given to all the categories that they say they do. Know your organization, your own organization, know what your finances are, know whether you're doing well, whether you're not doing well, when it was set up, what your policies are, and you never know what a funder might ask for. Prepare a proper budget for your project and for your organization that you can use. You may need to go in and do some background information. If you've got full, if you've got it so you can accord all the activities in core across all of the funders or all of your projects that you're asking for, that full economic costing, that's it. Then please use that. That will help you an awful lot. Get help to do those budgets from your finance team if you can, and keep them in the loop about the larger bids, because they're going to be handling it. They're going to be, if you need reports or financial reports, they're going to have to fulfill it. So make sure they're in the loop all the way along. And then don't under budget. Include all sensible costs. And if you don't know all the costs, it's always worth putting a subtotaling your project budget, adding 10 to 15% for overheads, and adding that on a separate line and adding that into your budget as what you're going to do. The thing is that when that money comes in, make sure that 10%, if you get it, goes overwards. Suzanne's asked, what do trusts want to see when they ask about a charity's reserves policy? Your charity has to have a reserves policy. There should be something in the charity SORP regarding it, where you're going to do, how much money you need to have in your reserves. The Charity Commission leaves it, and then Oscar follows the Charity Commission on this, and I think Charity Commission of Northern Ireland does as well. They leave it up to the trustees of each charity to decide what is reasonable for that charity and what works. I've worked at charities where they had 3 months of reserves of accounts, or 3 months of operating expenses as that, and where that was, a couple £1,000s. And I've also worked at them where it was multiple millions of pounds. And it depends on what was involved in, ultimately, at the very minimum, what it's going to do if you had to close shop tomorrow. What would be involved? Redundancy payments, canceling subscriptions, canceling leases, selling things off, ensuring that the resources and services that you can deliver are being delivered by other people. Your charity reserves policy lets funders know why any money you've got left over in the bank, any of your savings, what you're going to do with it, why you're going to do with it, the justification for that. You can be justified in saying you've got £14 million in reserves if you are justified to the average reasonable person to have that. If you don't have that, or you say we have no reserves, you're not a good risk if you don't have good reserves, because what happens if we have another pandemic? Are you going to close up shop? If they gave you any money, is that money going to be used and available for the program that you promised to be delivered? So I think there's quite a lot about reserves on Fundraising Hub if you do a search. and do reserves or reserves policy. There's quite a lot there. There is quite a lot of information. What your reserves policy in words, when I've been filling in applications lately, is they want to know what the justifications are. So make sure that when you've got those reserves policy, it's not just we have adequate reserves. What do you term adequate, and why are you terming it that? And make sure that the trustees have language around it. It doesn't have to be long. It can be a couple sentences, like this money will cover us if we have redundancy payments and we have to, heaven forbid, close shop tomorrow. I hope that answers your question on that one, Suzanne. And we're going to go a little bit longer because she's asked one more question. Do trusts mind if they only fund a small percentage of a large budget, or is it better to present a smaller budget so they have a larger contribution? That's going to depend on the trust. And it really will, and some will tell you very clearly and some won't. What I would say is there's no hard and fast rule. Know what your larger budget is. If you're going for a smaller percentage to the funder, know what that funding is going to go to cover. Is it going to cover part of the whole? Is it going to cover one line item? Is it going to be a contribution? Is it going to cover major ones? A lot of them now are saying very clearly, we want to be the sole funder of this project, or we want our funding to have a large impact on the project, or we are quite happy to contribute to anything that you need us to contribute to. So go in and ask them questions. If that's not listed and they give a phone number or an email address so you can contact them in advance, only do this if they don't have it listed elsewhere. Go and give them a call and say, would you prefer to fund the whole project? Would you prefer to fund a smaller amount? We are quite happy to put in to our application, which is the better side of things. Some of them will still not say, well, you just do what you want to do best. And we'll take it on that. I would then actually go back and take a look at their accounts and see what they funded. Sometimes in the accounts, they're starting to say what the funding was used for. So it might be to cover a portion of X activity or X funding requirements. Some will say it covered the whole project. You'll find it will often become clear, but if it doesn't, give them a call. That's my best suggestion. Otherwise, I would to tell you the truth, some of the best grants and most lucrative grants I've had have been a little bit of a shot in the dark. And it's just, well, this seems like a reasonable approach. This seems to match what they're doing. They haven't said how much they fund. They haven't said how much they haven't funded. Let me just send it off. And sometimes it's really clear. One of the points that came this morning in the training session that I was attending in the conference session was, look at your proposal from the point of view of the funder. If you were giving funding for this project that you're submitting an application for, what else would you want to know? Have you answered all the questions that you would want to know answers for? So I hope that's helped some of you. My name is Deanna Wolf. I am the senior consultant here at Money Tree Fundraising, and we provide our live Q&A on the third Thursday of each month from about 12:15 to 12:45. We're answering your questions or any questions that we can find within the Trust Fundraising Hub. Our next session is on the 20th of April at it's a Thursday, and it is at 12:15. Hope to see you there. Have a nice afternoon. Bye-bye.